indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, play ball. All right, so I sent an agenda out. Before we dive in, does anybody have any other agenda, high level agenda items that we would like to talk about? There's plenty here. And I would imagine next meeting, we're gonna have even. So, broken up in two pieces. First, the subcommittee can give us a briefing on their interviews, their questions, some of their background research into the references. And then the second half is what do we want to do going forward with some of the information in there. We have plenty of options on the table. So with that said, turn it over to the subcommittee and figure out which respondent wants to be debriefed first.
Margaret, why don't you give it a shot?
Sure. I'll just start off by saying Fisher flew it out of the water. Behan barely showed up, in my opinion. Fisher answered all the questions before we even asked them. They did their homework. Their presentation was on. They did a lot of their homework. And I kind of assumed that they would have a lot more information because they did the master plan, but they didn't. And when it came to asking questions, like what about climate change? They really didn't have an answer. And he just said, if you're talking about signs, which made no sense, you just couldn't answer the question. And my other observation was that they were just talking about how much money, what their hourly rate was, and how much work they could give us to make to cost less. So less work for them because they're already overcharging us, more work for us. So I found their presentation to be honestly terrible. I really thought Fisher knocked it out of the park.
Was
Who was represented from Behan?
All of them.
Yeah, everybody.
Oh, so everybody that we had a resume for, including Carrie Engel,
Yep.
Correct.
were on the, okay,
That is
that'd
correct.
just be helpful to know,
Yep.
you know, for both of those.
That is correct. And the three people. Yeah,
Frank and
Chris, yeah, Don and Frank were all on that as well. And they have, I know there was some concern about being in Rochester, but they have an office in Saratoga and they're opening a new one in Albany.
no,
So they'll be very local.
good to know.
And again, their presentation was very thorough. Again, they answered the top part of our questions
without having to ask.
without having to ask. We barely had, not barely, but we had some discussion, but they answered all the questions up front in anticipation of what we might want. And the two references came back. I didn't have the opportunity to do BN. I was kind of hoping that would go someone else would do that, but I don't know if it's because of my email, because it's a Hotmail and I was sending to city email addresses and it knocked it out as spam. It came back twice. So now I have to see if I can put in calls to these two other people.
Wait, so it bounced back on email addresses provided here?
No, it bounced back to my email address. I sent the three references for my email
Yeah.
for references.
And
after-
what I mean, so their three email addresses for the three references did not go through?
Did not go through, not because it was the wrong email address, it's
Oh.
because of,
Oh, okay.
There's-
I have that too. I've never
Spam filter
that.
would be my.
they were
guess.
returned, well, it happened with Pete's email the other day.
All right.
It came back.
Hmm.
And I imagine it's because of a spam,
Yeah.
Filter.
yeah.
Yep.
But a Karen Joseph, I can pass it around or I make copies. She said that they used Chris Kushel when he worked at MAPC for our zoning in North. It's in Massachusetts. I know I'm gonna get it wrong.
Andover?
CITU.
Situate.
Thank you. We were going to a form-based code at the time and had previously enacted the code in Greenbush Driftway section of the town. I found Chris was very responsive and listened to our concerns. He was very professional and met our deadlines. He could provide examples when asked. He was pleasant and had a good working knowledge of the subject matter. He was very collaborative. Please let me know if you need any more information. And she was the town planner. Again, I have to try and make calls now. That's my email. Is housing. Um. I don't know.
No, that was good. Brief.
That's great.
Anybody else want to chime in on?
John?
I agree with everything Margaret said. You know, Fisher blew it out of the water and the other company didn't show up. And couldn't answer the questions, actually. You know, we talked about what we're gonna do to maybe skip the tour to the town because they've already done that. And they said, well, it's value paid, right? Something like that. You're paying for the value.
Yeah.
And which I didn't understand the answer.
Because they were hemming and hawing, because they didn't, because Rory had asked, what about some flexibility with payment? They've already been through the village. You know, that was a big
Right.
chunk of money. They hemmed and hawed and hemmed and hawed and
It's terrible.
Who did most of the
Terrible.
speaking for being?
being.
Ian. It was, I was frankly astonished, all right, and if I could come up with a couple of words, I would say it was just like, we're being, and you know who we are, and we're great, and pay us.
So did they kind of lean in on like, we're willing to work with you, we know you? kind of
There was,
things like that,
it was,
you know?
it was almost,
It's
they
almost
just,
implied.
the whole presentation just seemed to be off. I asked both Fisher and Bean the immediacy in terms of what would happen if we needed 3 months to get ourselves prepared, and what would happen if we had an organizational outline of what we felt were the most important things to cover. They both thought that was fantastic. There is no concern whatsoever about not being able to retain them. They both stated that. I liked Fisher because they're an aggressive new company, number one. They were on point. Literally, we didn't have to ask them much of anything. It was really quite informative in terms of listening to some of the things they suggested and thought about, based on some of our problems. Whereas, as I said, being they're disjointed now. They have all these people that used to work for Bean that went out on their own. All right, so I didn't ask the question, but having dealt with subcontractors my whole life, if you have somebody who used to work for you now selling to you, there's a premium for that. All right, and they were not particularly sensitive to the question I asked regarding budget. Okay, I believe Bean's comment was, well, you have more than enough in the budget.
Yeah.
Really? How do you know that? Okay, and so the tone of it was just, we are who we are, we should get it, thank you, you know, I don't even know why we're talking to you.
Yeah.
And I was really quite surprised. I mean, if I were to say that we had to make a choice, it would be very clear cut. That Fisher would be who I would go after. But the beauty of what they said was that that we have all the time in the world, okay, to get ourselves sorted if we decide that's what we want to do. We could engage them now, or we could wait and say, look, here's our outline. This is what we've dug up. This is all the people we've talked to. This is where we feel our problem areas are. This is what we need to do. I think we could get a much more accurate quotation out of them at that point,
Who?
out of Fisher,
Oh, okay.
okay, or whomever,
Oh,
again.
yeah,
you
no,
know.
I wasn't sure. where
But
you-
more importantly, it would seem to me that at the end of the day, we could write our own RFP based on what we want them to concentrate on, so that we don't waste the village taxpayers' money.
And
I am absolutely certain we need the help of these level of professionals, because they're on the leading edge of what new zoning is looking like. Okay, it's very, very different than what Anna and I have been enforcing. It's more practicable, it's more user friendly, it's more translatable. It's a lot of things that we aren't.
Yeah. I
Um,
also went onto the Clarkstown website and looked up their zoning, just because that's one of the examples that Fisher had done.
Yeah.
And the zoning was, it was all laid out. It was very user, I could have gone in and read any one of those. And I know that that's part of the thing that Fisher did for them when
Yep.
they rezoned and redid their, it was all very easy and
Right, and again, a lot of the things that were requested in the RFP were responded to in these two presentations. And arguably, I think half of them were meaningless. All right, I really don't see. I'll be direct, I don't think it makes a great deal of sense to have public meetings to discuss zoning. I think when we've got it drafted to a point where it makes some degree of sense, that we can explain it to the folks, absolutely.
Would
But-
the intent of public meetings to solicit feedback and concerns and issues with the current code? Is that what
Yes.
the,
Yeah, with that and
we have a general idea already?
yeah, I guess we do, yeah.
Okay, just want to make
No.
sure I'm understanding.
No, we do, but again, I think they overlaid everything they could possibly overlay to run up the numbers, to be honest with you.
Fisher came under budget as well. With no, like, in the end presentation at the end, it was, well, there's always extras and this is our hourly rate. They had
Oh,
an
yeah.
entire slide about their hourly rate after this has been reached and, because there's always extras.
That from them last time. We didn't get that from them last time, did we?
No, but this is a different animal.
Way
Mhm.
different.
Yeah.
And they also, I was surprised that actually, in my mind, I'm thinking, how did they do the comprehensive plan? Because they had no real idea, like. It was like they were brand new and didn't do any of their homework, but then they kept talking about Labella, who was there because they have put in the RFP for the brownfields.
Right,
And they wanted to talk about that when that
that's not,
wasn't the
that's not our
conversation.
purview.
Interesting.
That was not the conversation at all.
Just to return to the public
Oh, yeah,
public
sorry.
meeting just for a moment. One thing we talked about a lot in the comprehensive plan when we talked about zoning was that we have these different neighborhoods in the village that might have different asks and different wants of what their neighborhood character would be. I'm thinking specifically about ADUs when I'm raising this, because I know we talked a lot about some of the properties on the north end where it might be really difficult to have accessory dwelling units and still have space on lots as well as parking. Whereas maybe over by High Boulevard, that side of town, there's a little more space, that there's existing structures that can even just be converted on a lot of that property. So I think part of the public meeting idea is to try to get different neighborhoods together and have a sense of what they wanted to try to accomplish for zoning there. And I'm not sure, public workshops could be a good space if we could get enough outreach to different neighborhoods and, have different tables where each neighborhood's able to talk about what they'd like to see. At least in terms of, specific pieces like ADUs. I'm not sure that there were a lot of other clear zoning questions like that. that
Yeah, I
came
wonder
up.
how much.
Home businesses.
Home businesses, yeah.
That was the
another
other big one. Because they're already in effect in areas where they're not supposed to be.
Yeah.
Just have to go on Google Maps to find those. And we did that when we did our tour,
Mhm.
we
Both of these companies have software and the like I have never seen in terms of the ability to identify houses and what they are and
Right.
so they have all that information. And I'm not in any way against a public hearing, okay, or discussions. What I'm trying to say is until we all have read the big black book, all right, and have some handle on it, and we've all decided that these are the pieces we want to attack and discuss, so that at the end of the day, we've got a report that we can submit to the Board of Trustees. It doesn't make a great deal of sense to then it makes a great deal of sense at that point in time, in my mind, to then sit down with the public, because we got something to show them. Most people, and I would think there's some people around this table, never been involved with zoning in their lives.
But it may be something they don't want. And so there is a tremendous benefit to ask the community what they want before, giving the impression that we make the decision. That's hopefully.
As
we're
well
not.
as to present what we're discussing with
Yeah,
them, because
yeah.
coming to people when there's a finished product
Yeah,
This isn't a
is
finished
well, yes, but at some point, we're not talking about having, public meetings tomorrow.
Right.
We're talking about having public meetings at some point during the process.
I don't
And-
disagree with that,
Yeah.
as long as we are organized enough so that when they sit down, they
can
have
ask the right
something to look
questions.
at,
Right.
so that they can ask intelligent questions.
Yeah.
And we would have an
Maybe
intelligent answer
surveys
to
sent
that.
out ahead of time, right? To what are your concerns? Wasn't that done with a comprehensive plan too? I remember,
It
I remember
was.
answering a bunch of things.
Yeah, that was through the village though. Yeah.
Right, but
Yeah, and
very
they helped
similar.
us, design it based on
Right,
So
some of the
Jared,
things we
what
had
you're
talked
saying
about.
is like the AD, so you're saying like where I live, Chesterwood Court, they might want ADUs and another area might not want to.
Exactly.
So then you'd have an R1 that would want ADU and R1 that wouldn't want an ADU, something like that.
So, and that,
Each area.
exactly, and I think that that's also where we really need consultant input in how that plays out. Because, yeah, if these are all R1 districts, how are we differentiating between, use cases for them?
from the zoning point, I mean, I think that one of the first things we need to decide is, are we gonna look at area or are we gonna look at use? What areas, where are we gonna start? We've gotta start with one or the other. We can't bounce back and forth. I mean, areas much easier to look at. I mean, I shared quite some time ago in the commercial district, what's the minimum frontage, 50? I
Mhm.
think we have 85% of the properties in the village that are 25-foot frontage, so those types of
Yep.
things make absolutely no sense.
And
So
that's,
if we wanna start,
that's.
do we
part
wanna
and
start
parcel
slow or
of
do we
what
wanna
could-
start dig in?
That's part and
I don't think we're
parcel
there
of
yet.
what I said about the 3 months at the first meeting. We need to dig into this to understand this and the outline that was done in 2020. All right, will save us hours if we just take it piece by piece and break it down and look at it, so we all understand what it is that the committee found out in 2020 needed to be done, because that was the objective was to present the mayor with an executive summary of what a relatively intelligent group of people thought was wrong with our zoning. That was done, nothing ever happened from it. We're in a perfect position to use that as a springboard into a summary that we can then prepare for the mayor and the board of trustees to say, this is where we're at. This is who we think we ought to utilize. This is maybe our RFP that we want to see sent out under the guise of the city to get a much more realistic quote.
So let me bring it back up another level,
Go.
back up to where we are, what we need to accomplish tonight. And that is, I see it as several things in terms of next steps. We have plenty of options. One, do we want to choose one of these guys? Do we want to choose one of these guys and say, hang on, let us do our due diligence and then come back to you with a more specific and precise agenda based on the ad hoc report? We can get our ducks in a row and then reapproach them. 3, do we want to punt on this, redo an RFP and then use that time while we do the RFP to educate ourselves with the specific and exact needs that we need, tailor a new RFP, and then come back in later? Sounds like we have a few options.
I feel like that last option is wasting too much time.
I agree.
I think if the second option is say, yes, we're gonna do this, we will not start before January 1. Or maybe even January 30th, whatever this is. We're
Whatever
gonna,
TBD.
whatever. If we will have a contract for this time period from here to here. And in that time, we will come up with what we need them to do, let them do their work, and we continue to do our work. And then it comes together.
And that doesn't mean an entirely new process of a request for proposals.
No,
That
it's-
means
No, we work it out with them.
tailoring the terms of reference for the final contract to something that makes sense for what we need to do.
Right, their scope of work, they will know exactly what their scope of work is because we'll know what scope of work is for us.
Yeah, that's why we asked the question, could they adjust time schedules, adjust
That's
the
what I'm looking at right now,
deliverables, things like that? I mean, that's
And the
only
answer is
fair.
yes. Both
The
of
answer
them.
is
Do it on the
yes.
interview.
Right, because I think,
Yes.
No,
I think when it comes down to it.
no,
we
that was.
need These guys for even this first step. We wanna,
There's just.
because we're not even sure what we're supposed to do. These guys kind of know what we need to do.
Well,
absolutely-
they know what they need to do at a given point in time,
Right.
but again, they haven't read this either,
Right.
all right?
They did much more homework than we give them credit for. though.
Yes. they
I'm
did.
not arguing that,
Yeah.
okay? I just think that they've both stated we have plenty of time to decide who we choose. I think that, that we should spend a couple, 2, 3, 4 meetings and see what fun we have in terms of looking at this stuff and listening to people like Anna and Dave LaFountain, our building inspector, explain certain cases that have taken place and how the code was problematic. If we can get to that juncture, we can begin to develop a very formal outline, I would think, that would help the consultants be more efficient. That's all. I'm just thinking about taxpayer dollars,
Right, but if we say, yes, we want you January 1. Given
but we
date-
don't have to.
Right, but what I'm saying is that doesn't start their clock. That just means yes, we want you to start, we choose you.
We know we want to work with
We,
you.
we know we want to
Next
work
step
with
for
you.
them is to readjust the timeline according to what we.
That
want.
is correct.
We need to
And
have some internal conversations before we approach them.
correct. And then this is our scope of work. So that changes their scope of work. It doesn't mean that we send out all new. I mean, we'd say, yes, we like your work. We want to work with you. Our timeline has been readjusted. We're going to come together and figure out what our scope is going to be and what it is for you. And then go from there. Because I feel like we're just delaying that, and that doesn't sound like a
It
good
sounds
idea.
like one of the options, the third option is if nobody liked either one,
Oh,
that would probably have to,
untrue.
it would probably have to, go back up and figure out this RFP to cast a better net, but that doesn't sound like it's the case.
Yeah.
It's not the
It
case.
sounds like it's, so if I was, let me see if I can say this back, since I've been here in consensus. We go with Fisher. There's several pieces here, so on the left side, it's go with Fisher, engage those guys. Hey, we select you, we want to engage you at a date TBD. We need to do our due diligence to give you more specifics, so more guidance. And then in the meantime, so whatever that date is in the future, how 1 month, 3 months, whatever time we need to re-engage. Same time, they can start reading code and preparing for us, minimal, do whatever they need to do, but not eat up the budget. And then we use that time, we have to pick a time to chunk out the ad hoc report, have maybe little mini sessions and presentations and kind of dive in. Get all of our data and detail from each one of those sections prepped and ready. And so by the end of our due diligence period, we can re-engage those guys and we're good to go. Now, on the right side, we need to tell them TBD. But during that 3-month period, while we're educating ourselves, we also need to re-engage them about a timeline, readjust the timeline, if we need to at all. Or do we just say, we like your timeline, we're just going to declare whenever the clock starts. So we're gonna shift it out if we need 1 month, 3 months, whatever. My only concern is if we run out of time, or will they just continue to go over it? I'm sure, I think the answer is yes. So if they're capped between now and the end of next year, we just kind of, it's like a sliding scale. We just kind of move it out.
Remember, just like the comprehensive plan, we had a meeting after we selected the consultant. We had a meeting.
That's right, to work on, to
afterwards.
refine the timeline. Yeah,
Remember,
okay.
refine the
Yeah.
timeline. We told them when we wanted them to engage with us. We were very
Yeah,
prescriptive.
that's a good idea. Perhaps
Yeah,
what-
and that's the way to control that,
Yeah.
so that the clock isn't ticking.
Yeah.
And you were on that
Yeah,
along.
yeah,
with
no, I
the-
remember that. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
so what, first step could be, we select you guys. Let's, we can set a date for next time we can meet them to refine the timeline. That'll give us time to say, hey, how much time we're gonna need to get through this ad hoc report,
Right.
get our act together. And then we can come back to them a little bit later to figure that out.
I mean, their clock doesn't start until we sign a contract with them, and until we have decided what the terms of reference for the contract are, then that can't be pushed forward. So we're gonna need at least another meeting, if not several, in order to define what the terms of reference are. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is saying what do we want to actually ask them to do? But that doesn't prevent us. I mean, if we had 2 proposals in front of us that we were equally happy with, then it would obviously be maybe we
Yeah.
would need to do something else. But if we're talking about, it's pretty, it sounds
Sounds
to
like
me
it's
like
clear
it's
cut.
pretty clear that there's a big gap between the two.
There
We
is.
can make a indication that we want to select you, and now we're working on developing the contract and making sure that we have the terms of reference in place. And it's also useful to get comments from them on whatever we develop as well, which is additional time to say, these are the things we need. We'd also like your feedback on what you think we're missing that you need to be doing.
No,
And that gives us all of that time that you're talking about, where we need to talk about what actually goes into what we're doing. But I don't think that puts back needing to define those things and then ask for a whole new proposal.
I'm simply,
Yeah.
all I'm
Perfect.
simply asking us to do is not to engage these, if we want to say you got
So
the
we get
job,
back.
great. Okay, but I want to know how you're billing us. I want to know how your time's going to get charged.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want you doing anything during our
Yeah.
due diligence,
Oh, yeah.
okay? Unless you can specifically say to us, well, my God, we could help you with this, this, and this in the due diligence process.
And if they haven't signed a contract, then they're not charging us for it.
Well, that may be, but again, to me, I want to make sure that we as a group get the best control we can and provide the best product to these consultants so they can do the best job.
All right,
That's all I'm after.
2 questions. First things first, do we have consensus on Fisher?
Yeah, sounds that way.
Yeah.
I
All
say
in
yes.
favor?
Yeah,
I,
was that
Opposed?
was that recorded, your thing? No, okay.
No.
I think
No.
they had recording issues, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We had technological challenge.
Yes, I
All right.
just these. I
We
thought-
finally got
Your
it.
name as going forward, that you would be the contact person.
Perfect, that's fine. Second question is, in order to figure out when to go back to these guys after selection, how much time, Rory, do you think it will take to get through the ad, if we're to chunk it out, maybe 1 section per meeting? How many sections and how many meetings do you think we need to get
Well,
through this
from
thing?
memory, there's probably 15. Okay, I'm not suggesting we need to go through all of them.
It's like 3 pages, right?
Yeah, but it's bullet points based on the areas of the zoning code that are problematic.
But wasn't
But
it
some of
like,
them may be pretty,
right, but wasn't, yeah,
Pretty
wasn't
cut and
wasn't
dry,
one of them
right.
just like
Yeah.
the definitions or something? I mean,
There,
we could
there's a big,
skip over
there's a
that.
bunch in there that's, well, in the zoning, that's like, we can kind of
Right.
outsource though to those guys.
Right.
You guys know best. We want to focus on
And
the
that-
issues that we care about.
Definitions would be one of them.
That's,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay, so
how
that's
right.
relatively simplistic. I think that as Anna and I begin to start talking about what has come before us in the last couple of years, and the building inspector starts explaining what people want when they walk in the door, it will become very clear why this is so problematic, and ergo, what could be done. These guys in their presentations had some, I thought, incredibly creative ideas that I'd never even heard of, in terms of the way they can do mapping and identify and use overlay districts to take away the problems we were just talking about in terms of, okay, well, you've got an ADU in your yard and I want to put one in mine and you're R1 and you got it done when nobody cared and now I have to go through all this. That can be eliminated, okay, with proper zoning and overlay districts.
So let me throw out a timeframe. We have between now and February 1st, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 5 meetings to now and February 1st.
Okay,
February 1st is the 5th meeting. You think we can get it done in 5 meetings?
I would like to at least have the leeway to go 2 more meetings in March if we needed it.
3 months.
Well, there'll be 2 more meetings in February, right?
Then start in March, start engaging with them in March. do you
Well,
mean?
The fifth meeting is February 1st.
Again,
7 meetings would be March 7th, and that would give us 7 meetings.
That gives you two per meeting on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think, and again, it's, I hated to have this thing printed, I really did. And I even hate more that I'm asking you guys to read through it. All right, but you really have to.
Well, you need to.
Yeah, that's-
I mean,
that's
you
our
don't, because the zoning is in here, but the zoning book is this thick, okay? But it ties to 3/4 of the things in here.
it references it to all.
Right, and so I think if we've all gone through this and realized where all of the conflict is, we can use the ad hoc committee outline, we can do our own outline, but it would seem to me we could knock that out in 6 or 7 meetings.
Okay, so here's what I'm hearing. 7 meetings, including the next one, which is December 7th. And the 7th meeting, which would be March 7th. We would use them, break up the ad hoc report, and we would chunk out 2 topics per, whatever it may be. I don't know how many.
Well,
specific.
and we have enough people that we could break it into segments, okay?
So I think we need to figure that out. We need to be specific we need to create an agenda for the next 7 meetings based on the ad hoc report. That's another way to say it.
All right,
Part of that, that's one next step. Another next step is to reach out to these guys and say, yes, we've chosen to select you. We would like to set up a meeting in the next several weeks to go over, to finalize a timeline and kind of, figure out some more specifics of our engagement.
Is this only our choice to make this decision, or does it have to go through the village board as well?
this is our choice.
This is our choice.
We make the recommendation.
So they're still
They
gonna
vote on
sign
it.
off on it, right? 'Cause it's their money.
That's my understanding.
Right. Well, it's our money, but.
Yeah, well, they'll vote based upon our recommendation.
Right.
Okay.
All right, so 7 meetings, we have to come up with a specific agenda for the next 7 meetings based on the ad hoc report. I will reach out to Fisher to let them, well, actually, if they need to vote on it, the board needs a vote on it, then I will reach out to Frank and say, hey, we've selected.
All the trustees.
All right, I'll reach out to all the trustees and say, hey, we've selected, what is the next step? Can I reach out and give them the nod? How do they want to deal with that? Based on that answer, I'll go ahead, once I get the yay or nay, I'll go ahead and reach out to them and let them know we selected. We would like to set up another time in the next several weeks to go over the specifics of our engagement.
And I think you might, when you reach out to the board, just also clarify that while we've selected, we also intend to use the next 3 months to conduct.
Yeah, I'll lay out
diligence.
exactly what we talked,
Yeah.
I think it didn't, obviously CC everyone here, so just in case I miss something, just feel free to reply to all and cover for me if I miss something.
Well, I'll take a shot if you don't mind at creating the agenda from the ad hoc.
That would be, Rory, that'd be very helpful, because ultimately, I mean, that knowledge is in your head.
Well,
I mean,
I just think,
I'm just saying, we are going to rely on you a lot. to
ask
help
you,
you.
you know,
We're gonna have to
I used
rely
to
on
like
Maria
you.
a lot to write this, because
No,
I can speak for myself. I don't know anything about zoning. And so this ad hoc report will help all of us kind of just orientate us to some.
are we gonna ask Dave to be at these meetings? He should be paid to be at these meetings.
I don't think he needs to be at all of them.
Well,
I asked him to attend. He said,
I
yeah.
think
Yeah.
he needs to give a report as one of these thematic meetings,
Yeah.
along with Anna, quite frankly. I mean, the next meeting, if you could all just do a 20-minute, high cut, report
work.
about what you're dealing with, I think that would be the way to start the whole process. And then after that, go into those things that we all have been hearing that we need to discuss,
Yeah.
as specific themes. And whether it means each one of us has to take a theme and figure something out and present like we did with the comprehensive plan, or get somebody else to come in and do that.
Yeah, I like that idea, Marilyn. And so because our next meeting is only a week away also.
It's a week from
So,
tonight.
if Anna and Dave and Rory, if you all took some time and presented on, yes, the ad hoc committee report, but also just whatever key issues you see. We could also use whatever time's left. If Rory's able to develop a sketch of an agenda, we could kind of talk through that at the December 7th meeting.
I'll do my best to do that and break it down even further, okay? I mean, as I said, back in 2020, there were,
It's pretty broken down here, though. I
yeah,
mean, it's pretty
there were
specific.
6 of us that
Yeah.
met every 2 weeks for 4 months, okay, to go through the zoning book.
Right.
All right, not
We
to
should be able
mention.
to do this in 3 meetings then.
Yeah. But were
Faster.
was every topic covered in there? And I'll throw a few out. So, you and I talked about the adult zone. Was that all discussed
Sure,
Yeah.
as part of that?
That was-
Okay,
absolutely.
how about the whole cannabis business
No,
enterprises?
It's all new.
Okay, remember, this is from 3 years ago, so
Right.
things are changing rapidly.
Yep.
How about like new technology that's coming into the village that is going to be needed downtown to charge electric
Mm.
cars?
That's,
Or other things that we haven't thought about that
Right,
are
well, there's gonna be-
emerging issues.
well, those
you
are
know.
the things that the consultant, I think, would add to the mix.
Oh,
Right,
true,
that's what I was
Okay,
just gonna
but in
say.
terms of the adult district, there was a very heated discussion about the adult district. You know why we have an adult district?
Yes, I do, and I told.
And why is
Lauren.
that?
Well, it was because and again, we don't know whether it's currently part of New York state law, but it was required that every community designate that.
Mhm.
Remember, I
Yeah.
gave my little presentation. My only concern is the area zoned as the adult district, I think, is up for sale now.
Well,
You know, so I
Who
just
knows?
want to
Maybe
make
we'll get it.
sure.
Well, it can be, yeah,
We're
that's-
gonna hash this out, and if it's not a requirement of New York State to have a designated adult district, what's the consensus of the
We don't need
the
one.
people around the table here? And if we don't have one, are we subject to a lawsuit? See,
Right.
there's
Do we
some
need one?
nuances here.
I can
I'd like
find
us
that
to
out.
talk about stuff like that.
'Cause
And
the-
then I want to hear what the community has to say, because they probably have no clue that there's an adult district here.
So-
the reason-
in the-
Oh, I'm sure there are.
Actually,
too.
everybody-
I got
everybody-
Oh, no, I know there are.
Living right next
No,
door
I
to me,
know
let me
that.
tell you. I'm
I
sure
know
he
that, but I'm-
knows.
So I think,
serious.
I think a lot of the things you mentioned are the forward thinking things as well, the what could happen in the future. I think the ad hoc report addresses a lot of the things that happened in the past, but I also, the discussion just reminded me of something I was thinking about a few days ago, which is, and that I probably should know, do we have a database of like how many variances of what kind have been asked for over time? I assumed that was not the case, but I think developing something like that would be really
Yes.
useful
There's a
to
paper
know,
record.
where things have actually been problems, rather than just like, I have a sense of what on the ZBA we've been asked to address, but having actual numbers of this many setback requests have been an issue in these particular neighborhoods would be really useful to have, and I think it's something
I
that
would
we
say
could
that
find a
doesn't
process we're
exist.
starting to develop.
They, when
There's no way.
I took over the planning board chair, there was one file in the village hall and one drawer. All right, that had been used for 30 years. All right, the only thing I found in there was the planned development district for the Rossi project, okay, over on Prospect Hill. Nothing else. Now, I know there were a whole lot of other things that happened in those 30 years. Nobody kept anything. When Dave LaFountain took over for the building department, you could not walk in the space. There were so many files. They basically were all meaningless because most of them were applications for permits that were never
Never
followed
processed.
through.
Right.
So guys like you or me, or you even, Kamran, might have said, I've been waiting 7 months. When are you gonna give me my permit for my pool? My kids want to go swimming. And yeah, I'll get to you. And so you put your pool in because your kids were screaming at you. And that really is the essence of what went on in terms of zoning and planning.
And the building inspector.
I'm the building inspector, because the building inspector is the code enforcement officer. We've never really had one other than fire department, okay? But in terms of, hey, your sign is not proper, okay, or it's oversized, or any of the other crazy stuff that we run into, we've not had it enforced.
Well, we've had building inspectors before.
Yeah, but they don't do anything.
That's
Or at least
your
didn't write
opinion.
down anything they were
Yeah,
doing.
Yeah,
they were not
Yeah,
available
I
a
mean,
lot of
'cause
times.
we had issues and we know the building inspector prior to all of this would come out, with a flashlight
Right.
at nighttime to see something, and that's the way it worked. But I mean, those are the types of things I think we need to hash out, because we did identify the lack of, any sort of record keeping when we went through that whole comprehensive plan process.
I think it's much better though. Kathy's good.
But she's
and-
exceptional.
And the Laurel was
Yeah.
before her. She was very good
Yep.
as well.
Indeed. So
So,
for the last few years, we have records
right,
and we have minutes, okay, and they're available online and they can be read. But in terms of what
Variances.
one of the things that we're gonna need to look at, and I don't wanna be off topic here, but is the enforcement. All right, because even though we have a 6 hour a week building inspector, okay, he's not running around doing a lot of enforcement.
Oh, it's only 6 hours? We were told it was 2 days. That's
Well-
what we were told.
Well,
And we already identified that as a red flag.
I think either way, it's still.
Yeah.
I think the word enforcement.
well, let's put it this way, if you get there at 7:30 in the morning,
you got it.
you got him until 9, and then he goes out on quote inspections unquote, and he's not seen again. Okay, so
Down really fast.
how that all works is another whole political football that's gotta get dealt with, but
Yeah.
that's not our problem.
Assuming that's not personnel.
Well, again,
It's still something we discovered into the comprehensive plan that we don't have somebody to do. what
Enforcement
needs
on
to be
anything.
done.
This will be-
Yeah.
Enforcement.
Might
period.
take-
Well, the other thing was before this.
Yeah, we already have
I
trucks.
I don't know how Frank handles any of this stuff, but I know that in the past, the only way anything got looked at is if you called and said, listen, there's been a damn couch at the corner of
Yeah.
Ford and Milton for the last 3 months. Can somebody go down there? And then they would go down there and they'd say, well, Anna called on you.
Right.
So that was always a big issue too.
Yeah.
That was the only time that codes got enforced was when somebody actually
Yeah.
complained. And then you got thrown under the bus for being the person
Right.
that complained,
Right.
you know, so.
Yeah, that we do have the complaint form that we heard about.
Oh, I've not ever seen
Yeah.
that.
well, the enforcement is a whole complete
That's an
Yeah,
section
that's-
of the code that we need
So,
to deal
That's
with.
up to us and how we do it.
Speaking of Frank.
Add teeth to whatever code we want.
Kamran, could I just ask you, I actually have another engagement for the next meeting. I will get as much stuff as I've got together. I will reach out to Kevin McDonough. And would you present the issues that I come up with?
Absolutely, sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so 15 minutes left and I think we've made some good progress. So here's maybe actually one of the items that I have here is to reach out to the board tomorrow on the specifics. So
Well, the
instead,
board just walked in.
so Frank, we have made a decision on who we'd like to select. That's Fisher. So I was going to email the trustees on how to proceed. Do I reach out to Fisher, let them know? Do you guys have to vote on it? What's the next step for us?
We would have to vote on it because you have to execute contracts and I can't sign a contract till.
No, we're not
approved and
accepting the contract.
Authorized, so that'll be the next step. We'll do it at the December 11th meeting, make sure it put maybe just a little bit of the basis used to make the determination so that there's no argument about that ultimately.
Well, we're not accepting, we want to use Fisher, but we're not accepting the contract they sent us. We just want to let them know at this point that we're going to use them for the future. I
So
believe-
part of my email was gonna be, here's the approach we wanna do.
Okay, right.
When it comes to contract negotiation, RFPs, generally the decide on what you want, then the mayor would negotiate the contract at that point. Obviously, I'm gonna use you guys to be the negotiator.
It's more like a timeline thing, when the clock
Well,
starts.
timeline and so terms of reference, so the actual scope of the
Yeah.
contract.
Yep.
So not so much the financial and all of that,
Yeah.
but what we're actually asking them to do, which I think we want more discussion on.
So we're gonna take the next 7 meetings and go through we're gonna chunk out the ad hoc report and educate ourselves all the way through. And at the end of those meetings, we should have enough to inform Fisher what we want what those guys want to focus on.
Just so you're aware, BOA is requiring, the state requires interviews by us. So that will be happening over the next couple of weeks thereabouts. So we'll hopefully eventually get a BOA decision sooner rather than later here so that you do have that lead time anyway that was being discussed.
Okay.
So we were on that, but we did find manual where it requires and check with the state and they said, yes, you have to give it BOA.
So it doesn't sound like we'd have to go back to Fisher, even if we did get approval to engage them from the board. We have to reach back out to them to talk about specifics of the engagement. That won't happen until probably in the new year. So we'll have plenty of time to get BOA squared away.
It sounds like you may include this in your email to the board that you would like to select, the board to select Fisher to authorize the CAC to revamp the scope
Mhm.
and authorize the mayor to negotiate the contract and execute and present it to the board, contract for execution at a later date. That sounds like, at least we'll send it to Carla, see if that passes muster, and if it doesn't, obviously it'll be a change at that point.
Was that revamp the scope based on what the ZAC is recommending?
Yes,
Exactly.
Okay,
yes.
just want to make sure I heard.
Yep. I think it was to authorize the ZAC to revise the scope, that's what it said, so.
Okay. I don't know if I have Carla's email.
I'll,
Thank you. Okay.
EPSR law, right, again, KWB at EPSR law.com.
I'm sure you haven't memorized it. The amount of time you talk, have to talk to them. God.
KWB at what is it again?
EPSR law.com.
SR Law. Okay. Thank you.
Brentwood Pottage doing roads.
When will Bittner be on that? BBSB.
Never, I hope.
All right, so it sounds like we accomplished what we wanted to tonight. Yay for that.
What's the brief reason for Fisher, just so if we're being asked in active session on the 11th and nobody's be able to attend, what were the guiding points said?
They knocked it out of the park.
I like that.
They knocked it out, they
Oh,
did,
they're not
Knocked out of the park.
they answered all of the questions that we had prior, not even, we never had asked a question. They answered all of it. Very easy, very amenable. What else am I
Your
missing?
garbage place, because it's the Rochester firm.
They have sorry, yes, they have people in Saratoga and opening their office in Albany.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So
they're all over
very
the
local.
state,
It's not a
actually.
garbage plate though, so tell them that you're Slavic.
That's right. they-
Bringing Brockport memories back.
Yeah, right. Oh, actually, they're working in the village of Fairport right now.
Airport, next to Brockport.
Yes. But yes, they were great.
Next to it.
Close.
And
On the canal, on the
flip
canal
side,
there.
Frank, I think the subcommittee was not impressed with VHAM.
Oh, yeah,
which
not at all. They were terrible.
I was surprised here. I wasn't.
Yeah, I was too.
Surprised to hear that.
I was wondering-
No longer with them, they bought some staffing for sure, and there was some interesting stuff we saw during the comprehensive plan, especially toward the end, that were a little bit.
I know you mentioned
Little
that.
chummy,
and-
chummy, buddy,
and
buddy
From the
kinda-
subcommittee's recollection, it sounds like they were really focused in on fees and
Oh, they were focused on fees in their presentation, and the other thing is that, I mentioned to the group, Frank, is that they're all now, a lot of the guys that work for them are all now subcontractors to them. All right, so there's a level of overhead added in on top of everything else. And I just wasn't comfortable with spending taxpayer money in that fashion.
That's fair. So I'm not surprised by your choice, but it's good to hear the reasoning, ultimately, make sure we're
They,
telling the right story.
Well, some of their
They also-
subcontractors also work for the village, so, you know,
Well, there is.
I don't know if anybody noticed that.
Yeah, Labarge for sure.
Yeah.
I knew that. But on measure, I think that's where we ended up.
All right, so next steps, I will craft this note, send it to Carla, and when it's ready, I will CC everybody and send it to the trustees. In the meantime, between now and the next meeting, you're gonna,
I'm gonna
Chunk it out?
I'm gonna endeavor to chunk it out.
next 7 meetings, okay?
We're trying to get the building inspector to come up with a report, whether it's next meeting or the following
Well,
meeting.
no, I'll
Give
talk
us
to
some time.
Dave as well, because he, I think could be very helpful in the context
Absolutely.
that he's been through 2 zoning rewrites, all right, in his career. And he does know his stuff. He knows this better than anybody, all right? So I'm gonna talk to him about highlights to add to the highlights that I've got so that, and you guys, as you really enjoy the next week reading through this, can sort of pick out your highlights, things that you find to be a little bit questionable.
Just the phraseology and sentence structure and
Oh,
paragraph
it's
structure,
all
it just.
It's un,
Ah, guys.
Hey, when the former attorney said, throw the whole thing out, you have to listen to it.
St. Rose, they voted to close it down tonight, so.
Oh, did they? They voted?
Yeah, that was crazy.
That's
What happened?
terrible.
They had an emergency funding request to the state. Apparently that didn't go anywhere.
Oh,
St. College of St. Rose.
103 years.
324, like it's gonna happen in March.
All right.
And I just emailed you the last email from Chris, so that you have his contact. info.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
It's down like 40%. Enrollment's down 40%.
All right.
While we were talking about it.
All good. All right. Adjourn. Thanks, everybody.
thank you very much. Well, I'm sorry. See you next Thursday.
Have a good night.
Marie,
You too.
Binders still, I'll take them back for you guys, but. that way-
property.
Well, Darvin didn't get his.
Darvin?
guys did
I don't know who the other,
lot line adjustment when you sold the property.
May have had access.
Hasn't been filed.
I'm not, the original.
No,
Okay.
you did another adjustment.
11 on the board.